if we're back yet or not. I don't think so.
Could take a second, but we should be back up in a minute here. All right, I have no idea what happened. We were just going along, and I noticed that it died. So our apologies. We didn't touch anything.
Sure, nothing. Didn't touch anything. Anyways, all right. I don't know where I dropped off, so I'll start at the beginning. No, I won't. But all right. So to pick up about where I think I probably left off, Abraham's life before this test of faith that shows up was not. He didn't demonstrate good faith. And for those of you that know the story, when God told him that he was gonna, that he was gonna have a son, and that he was gonna be the father of a great nation, and he was gonna, have as many kids as the sand of the sea, and all of that, Abraham and his wife Sarah decided that they would have children through Hagar, which is Sarah's handmaid. They decided that they would do that, which obviously was not in God's plan for them to do that. And so his beginning of the relationship that we see between him and God is not exactly what demonstrates great faith. But we reach this point now where he's ready to sacrifice his own son. And as we read on, right, and Abraham said unto his young men, he takes his young men with him, and they have all their belongings with them to go to the sacrifice. And he says to his young men, he says, abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son. And that's a picture of the cross being laid on Christ, by the way. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said to his father, my father, he said, here am I, my son. And he said, behold, the fire and the wood. And I can imagine that Isaac would ask this next question. He said, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Smart kid. You got all the stuff in your hands, Dad. We're going up to perform this sacrifice, but where's the lamb? In Abraham's answer, he says, and Abraham said, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there. And he laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. Imagine this, guys. Picture this actually happening, that this father, this son that he had long sought after, who he has in old age, the son that he was never supposed to have outside of God's promise, should never have happened outside of God's promise, he's ready to kill on the altar. And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here am I. And he said, lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest God, seeing that thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And as we read this story, we say, well, that is really amazing faith, that Abraham would go to this point of being obedient enough to God to be willing enough in the face of God to sacrifice his own child. And one might raise the question, and they might say, well, Abraham probably knew that God was going to stop him. But in this, and I'll be closing out soon here, but if we go over to the book of Hebrews, and we go to Hebrews, and we go to chapter 11. There it is. Hebrews. Give me just a minute to be able to get there. And let's see, Hebrews 11. And we go down to verse 17. Okay. And we read a kind of a recount, a brief recount of what happens with Abraham in Genesis. And the Bible says this. It says, by faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac. And he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called. So there was this element of Abraham believing that his son would be okay, but not necessarily that Abraham believed God would stop him before he did it. Because in the very next verses we read this, accounting. This is verse 11. This is Hebrews 11:19 for those of you who are reading on. Accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence he also received him in a figure. See, Abraham and Sarah had received this child of promise, this son